Just get,
Observation 1 is the resolution.
let me get my flow paper.
Okay. Sorry, I thought you were playing on your computer, just a lot of people do that. You guys have the topic, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think Arden knows it.
Let's go.
Observation 1 is the resolution. The United States should become a state party to the International Criminal Court. Observation 2 is because of the word should. This is a policy round, which means we will be evaluating it through net benefits, which is the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people. Observation 3 are the definitions. So the International Criminal Court, which we're referring to as ICC, is basically an intergovernmental organization with the jurisdiction to prosecute individuals for international crimes of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. A state party is basically a country ratified and legally bound to an agreement, and the specific agreement that we're referring to based on the resolution is this International Criminal Court, which is basically a ton of treaties and individual legislation that the United States is going to be legally bound to. So observation 4 is going to be the plan text, which is the resolution. The United States will become a state party to the International Criminal Court. Observation 5 is the solvency. So currently, as of right now, the system that was put in place before is the United Nations War Crimes Commission, and it's very ineffective because it missed like 20,000 crimes in 3 years, which is why the International Criminal Court is proven to be a lot more effective, which is why we're going to be able to solve for like the jurisdiction over crimes of genocide and war crimes. Yeah.
Who votes on what war crimes are prosecuted?
So there are different like nations part of the ICC, and they all have like votes to say what like passes through legislation.
Okay, so the U.S. would get that voting power.
Yes.
Now on to Advantage 1. Advantage 1 is U.S. legitimacy. So the uniqueness. 1, U.S. legitimacy is low as of right now, little a, because Trump is threatening the UN, and the support in the UN for the United States has actually dropped to 30%, which it is as of right now, versus it was 48% in 2016. 2, we can see Trump is out of the ICC as of right now, little a, is we can see because of the fact that Trump pulled out of the, that he wasn't a part of the ICC, he cut aid to Africa by 29%. So we can see that currently there's over 20,000 people that are starving in Africa due to the malaria outbreak, and Trump isn't doing anything about it. Little b is we can see that currently countries support the ICC over the system that existed before, which was the United Nations War Crimes Commission, but we can see that Trump is not following any of these systems at all, which is why a lot of countries don't support him. Now to the links. So first of all, we can see that the U.S. is going to become a state party to the ICC. 1, the ICC allows Trump to give support and funding to other nations. The specific example here is going to be that of giving aid to Africa for malaria. The warrant for this is actually when we were on good terms with the United Nations. This allowed us to actually provide treatment for over 7 million people to actually prevent the AIDS outbreak in Africa. 2, we can see UN support for the United States increases. We can see that this support is key to international stability at the point where the United Nations is key to like diplomacy and treaties with other nations. This is going to be important for the United States, but this the second sub point here is that this gives the U.S. hegemony, and this is going to be really important because at the point where the United States has hegemony, this is once again a leeway for the United States to give other nations humanitarian aid, which leads to the impacts. So the first impact is going to be that of humanitarian aid. This is going to be extremely important at the point where Trump is actually going to be able to send aid to malaria in Africa and prevent the outbreak at the point where there's a lot of people starving. This is key to people's quality of life at the point where people are starving and dying. This is horrible because this creates like structural violence at the point where like marginalized communities are like starving. This is really bad. 2 is that of foreign policy. We can see at the point where we're on good relations with the United Nations. This is key to actually creating diplomacy and international stability across the globe. So I'll take that up at the back time. So now to Advantage 2. Advantage 2 is that of retribution. So 1, the court began work in 2003. We can see that this helped deal with the crimes committed in former Yugoslavia and Rwanda. 2, the conflict in Libya. 2 is the conflict in Libya. Little a is fighting between the Libyan National Army, which is the LNA, and the UN-backed government of the National Accord. B, we have there have been attacks on citizens, attacks on hospitals, and captured men and women and children, and cholera outbreaks. 3 is the ICC requires the U.S. support in the Judiciary Act of criminalizing Khalifa. What?
Is his name? It's like Khalifa
Hafler, who's the leader of the LNA. Little a is the ICC requires requires the full commitment and for the U.S. to actually join in order for the ICC to actually be effective. 4 is the UN currently are only attacking with their own forces because no decision is made. Little a is there's actually a lot of fighting and conflict going on because there's no like actual international stability since the U.S. is acting without this ICC. Not to the link. So we can see the plan passes. 1, the U.S. joins the ICC in criminalizing Khalifa Hifter. Little a is we can see this. These forces are going to be backed by the United Nations, which means they're actually going to be able to take a strong stance against this person to like actually criminalize him for his war crimes. 2 is we can see perceptually the U.S. aids the United Nations and peacekeeping, thus increases the legitimacy of the ICC because we can see that in the status quo a lot of like humanitarian aid is really bad at the point where like the U.S. relies on the Red Cross and the Red Cross has like horrible legitimacy at the point where like there's like bad needles and it's like bad for example. Like it's just like really unsanitary, so that's why the ICC is going to increase like better peacekeeping and better like sanitary aid. 3 is to stabilize international law and decreases the tensions in the region at the point where like once again the ICC is like an international organization, so it's like advocating for diplomacy. So now to the impacts. 1, we can end. 1 is the end to the conventional warfare in Libya. The subpoint here is citizens are more safe and can be healed in hospitals because the ICC is effective. The next subpoint is UN peacekeepers and Red Cross members can alleviate tensions to actually decrease the cholera in the water. This is extremely important because cholera actually leads to death at the point where it collapses people's lungs and it's actually spread in like rivers, for example, that actually also affects the fish and biodiversity in the area, which means it's going to be key to actually end this conflict to like give people a better quality of life. The second impact here is international law is strengthened. We can see this decreases the probability of acts of international crime, which thus decreases tensions throughout the world. This is extremely important because at the point where there's less tensions, there's less of a chance of proxy wars. This is extremely important because proxy wars can go nuclear, and nuclear like high beta particles make multicellular life impossible, which will create extinction, which is why it is key to join the ICC to prevent these proxy wars. Yeah.
What's your link to the UN?
Because the ICC is like controlled by the UN.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Alright, I'm just gonna go 2 DAs, then a CP, then apple order red. Alright, everybody ready? Cool, starting right now. Let's start off with the first disadvantage, which is that of national security. The uniqueness is that first, 70 nations right now, that includes 70% of the world's armed forces, are non-members of the ICC. Second is that Russia, China, India, and other global powers are not members of the ICC. Third is that there's been a lot of recent corruption in the ICC. For example, the first prosecutor that was elected by the Assembly of State Parties was found to actually be sharing intel outside of countries that were in basically that non-member countries were getting some of the intelligence that the ICC had gotten from member countries. The link is that ICC membership mandates intel sharing from the US, which basically means that the US is forced to share national security information, not only about like military bases in regards to potential past war crimes committed that US soldiers may have committed, but also a lot of these operations are still currently going on, which means the US would be required to share basically intelligence that is regarding like the location of where some of these war crimes may have occurred, and like a lot of the intelligence that went into like a lot of how these operations carried out and are still carrying out currently in places in the Middle East, especially like in the Syria conflict. The internal links first is that the ICC is the highest score and has no check back, which means that basically like once the US joins, what the ICC says goes, and the US will basically have to share whatever intelligence that the ICC asks for. Secondly is that this is disproportionate intelligence gathering because Russia and China aren't part of the ICC, which means that the ICC will now have US information but won't have any of this information about Russia and China's bases in the region. Third is that it makes the US a more likely target for attacks of not only just just from like Russia and China, but also by like terrorist groups in the region, just because now that this information is out and in the hands of the ICC, it makes it more like hackable, because the ICC doesn't have the same like government like protection on like on their information that the United States does, and there's so much more, like so many more countries have this type of access to it when like because all of the member states have access to the information that is gathered from the intelligence that is like the ICC asked for. Basically, the impacts first is that Russia said in February of 2019 that they had the potential to strike the Pentagon with nuclear weapons, which means that a lot of tensions are increasing between the Russia and China. And additionally, in early March, Russia also warned that they were going to potentially strike regions in Syria with U.S. troops. This increases the likelihood of Russian attacks because now Russia is able to get more information about where U.S. troops are, specifically in Syria, and is able to basically like increases the likelihood that they would be able to have more like targeted attacks on specifically U.S. troops in the Middle East. This isn't just unique to Russia; also other countries that have like proxy troops in the Middle East are now able to know more about where the U.S. Like the U.S.'s operations there, which makes the U.S. more susceptible to these types of attacks, which means that lives are lost of U.S. soldiers and conflict increases in these areas. Now, the second disadvantage is that of Israeli and U.S. relations. The uniqueness first is that the ICC launched a campaign to reach out to Palestine basically in recent months and has kind of condemned Israel. Secondly is that Israel has expressed concern that they cannot treat Israel, that the ICC won't treat Israel fairly, and launched a complaint. Third is that Israel has been against the court since Palestine joined in 2015 as a member state and doesn't trust it. Second is that Israel, the link, wait, no, I don't know what order it is. Okay. Fourth is that Israel perceives the U.S. as one of its closest allies, since Trump has chosen Israel's first basically every chance he's had, because like Trump's so pro-Israel. Fifth is that ICC says they won't hesitate to prosecute if a crime fits their Rome statute, and they're also like investigating Israeli settlements right now. So basically, the ICC has proven to like continuously be against Israel. The links is that first, the U.S. becoming a member of the state gives the perception that the U.S. is moving away from Israel. Second is that Israel will feel threatened, and it will engage in more violence against Palestinians because they're scared about the U.S.'s like status as their ally. Third is that the U.S. is forced to support organizations that will likely convict Israel, which will decrease relations even more, because the ICC is already so against Israel. Basically, when the U.S. signs onto this, they're going to be forced to be like also against Israel, the ICC is going to be making decisions against Israel that the U.S. will like be required to sign onto and won't be able to have its own like opinion. Five is that the U.S. could block vote and Israel. Or the U.S. could also block votes and Israel would not be convicted and there won't be an end to settlement. So basically, either way, if the U.S. joins, even if they vote against Israel or in favor of Israel, either way, it's going to be bad. And now onto the impacts. First is that of intelligence sharing. The U.S.-Israeli relationship is key to dealing with terror. A lot ISIS and a lot of other jihadist groups are close to Israel, and Israel has a lot of intelligence sharing that right now they're giving to the U.S., and the U.S. is able to track a lot of these terrorists with using their like intelligence. And secondly is that there's a key military base that's located in Israel, which is key to U.S. hegemony in the region. It's one of the only military bases in the Middle East, and it gives the U.S. unique access to these regions and specifically fighting against terror. Third is that it's also key to sharing water recycling technology. Israel is the most advanced in the world in regards to water recycling. They recycle 80% of their water, and they're planning to share a lot of their technology with the United States. But if we don't, if we show that we're so against them, they aren't going to give it to us, which could be really key to helping the water crisis. Four is that this increases death in Palestine, because when Israel sees that the U.S. Basically like doesn't support them anymore, they can proliferate and start causing a lot more, if not like really big attacks on like Palestinian people, even just like smaller ground attacks, because like individual Israelis are scared that they no longer have like one of their biggest allies to support them. So let's go into the act phase. CP. Right. The counterplan is that the U.S. should restore funding and logistics support with the ICC. This would happen through normal ways and means as soon as possible. Basically, all it does is just restore the pre-Trump relationship, which means that the U.S. wouldn't be a member state, would still like give back funding and the logistics support that they had basically before they withdrew the support once Trump became president. Yes.
Could you repeat the text and the status?
Yes. The U.S. should restore funding and logistics support for the ICC and unconditional. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, now let's go on to their case. First, let's go to the first advantage of U.S. legitimacy. So basically, they go on to talk about how basically the U.S. has stopped aid. However, basically what you're going to be seeing is that this is a completely like non-unique point in regards to like the ICC. This aid is not coming from the ICC. none of the aid, like the ICC literally does not do anything in regards to like supplying aid for like cholera and food. The ICC is literally just like a court to decide like war crimes after the fact. The US was having aid to the ICC that would help make these decisions. It has nothing to do with any of this humanitarian aid that my opponents are talking about. There's literally nothing that makes it so that the US can't give aid to these countries when the US isn't in the ICC. The US can give aid to these countries now. The reason they're not doing it is not because they're not in the ICC, it's because of Trump's like rhetoric and just general like anti aid sentiment. Then they go on to talk about how the war crimes like they could be like committing, like helping solve war crimes and things like this. However, since 2002, the ICC has only had 8 convictions as of 2017, which means that they aren't even solving these war crimes at like solving the cases of these war crimes anyways. And additionally, recently a lot of like African countries like South Africa and Burundi actually withdrew from the ICC because there was a disproportionate number of arrests of Africans and they saw that their cases were actually being solved. There's no link to the UN here because the UN actually isn't affiliated with the ICC. There's no link to humanitarian aid because the ICC is for logistics and like solving these crimes anyway. And onto retribution, they say the UN is like fighting in these regions. However, it makes no sense that the UN would be fighting because there's no truth. Additionally, the ICC can't actually stop violent conflicts. They say that basically there's these criminalization for war crimes. However, just extend the response I just made about how they haven't even been solving war crimes, and it doesn't act. And they say also, it's a double bind because they say the U.S. image is low now, which means there's no reason the U.S. is key to make these war crimes be solved.
Okay, so the order is going to be the top of case, then the adds in order, and then this adds in order. Okay. Is everyone good? Okay. Starting with the top of case, they concede all of our definitions, so they're set for the ground. They also concede our solvency when we bring up specifically that the UN or the United Nations war crime program is not working, and because they missed 20,000 cases in 3 years. This probably means that there will always be 1% risk of solving for more crimes on the affirmative side, which will be very important to today's debate. Let's go on to our first point about U.S. legitimacy. Their first response was that it's not unique because the ICC does nothing about stopping like cholera and all these outbreaks. But we say, first of all, they concede our story that this is the first step for the U.S. to actually be taking part of something international. And when it's the first step, this will always follow in like the U.S. first working with the ICC, then working with the UN. When we bring specifically the analysis that Trump is like threatening to take funding out of the UN, probably means there's something that's bad in the status quo. And with Trump working with, or Trump and the U.S. working with other nations, whatever nations this may be, probably will increase or decrease tensions between the nations, and means that Trump and the United States will be working better with other countries. We also bring up specifically how when Trump stepped out of or like stopped like funding the ICC, he cut aid to Africa by 20%. This goes conceded because this is true. When they brought up that in 2002, the ICC is not efficient and only has 8 convictions, or kind of like prosecuted only 8 people. We say these are like 8 huge people. It like literally stopped like the Rwanda like genocide. It literally stopped like bigger genocides, which probably means these 8 convictions probably aren't single people, but are huge issues, which still means that we have always like a more chance of solving for big issues. We also brought up how like most countries prefer the ICC over the current system, which gives you more leeway by saying when the U.S. joins the ICC, this probably means the U.S. is taking stance just like stopping crime internationally, which probably means like more countries will end up joining the ICC, which will be the biggest response in today's debate. They brought up how they brought up how South Africa withdrew from the ICC because it was unfair, but the point of U.S. stepping in increases the legitimacy of not just the U.S. but the ICC. When the ICC legitimacy increases because other countries will also join, and this means more votes for like legislation and who's like going to be criminalized, probably means the legitimacy increases.
Is the War Crime Commission, is that for like prosecuting just U.S. war crime or like U.S. war crimes, or is it?
No, so what
like,
that is as of right now is like global, like anything with genocide internationally, like war crimes throughout like all of like the world.
It was ineffective.
It's like ineffective, as we brought up in the solvency. On our link story, they concede all the analysis that Trump will actually, or like the U.S. will start giving more aid to Africa, and we can see this worked in the past, how we curtailed the AIDS outbreak. This also shows that we will, like, perception be increasing the U.S. like perceptual link. We also bring up how the U.S. hedge is key to being able to give humanitarian aid. So when we talk about the impact of humanitarian aid, you have to give us full leeway. On our second point of retribution, they really concede too much of this. We bring up specifically how in Libya right now the LNA are like going against the UN-backed forces, and why this is specifically key, or why the U.S. is specifically key, is because the ICC said they would prosecute Hitler, who is the leader of the LNA, only if the U.S. joins the ICC. And what this means is by actually definitively saying that Hitler is wrong and criminalizing him, the UN can take the first stance in actually stopping the LNA forces. This goes completely conceded and is very important because we show that the U.S. is the only the last puzzle piece into being able to actually end this entire conflict in Libya. We also bring up on the link story how the U.S. or the UN is currently right now just biding their time. They have forces there, but they aren't able to make a definitive strike because there's no real consensus that who the bad person is. When we bring up this will stabilize ILOB and increase diplomacy not just in Libya but throughout the entire world, because there'll be more countries who are going to be part of the ICC. Probably means we'll be stopping future genocides. Yeah.
Wait, sorry, you said someone specifically in the ICC, so they'll only convict this person if the U.S. joins.
Yeah, so the U.S. is the key piece because U.S. has already been bombing Libya. So when the U.S. joins the first step to criminalizing Hitler, who is the leader of the LNA, this means that they will give full leeway for the UN to have the first strike and actually take down the LNA.
Wait, sorry, the UN or the ICC?
The ICC.
Okay.
On the impact level, we say this will end conventional warfare in Libya. Specifically, the citizens will not be killed. We also talked about the cholera outbreak and how this is specifically bad and can lead to many deaths. Going on to their point about national security, the overview is that the U.S. is not going to be giving top secret information. This is completely skewed and misinterpreted. It's not like the U.S. is saying, oh, we have military bases here, doing these operations. That's not at all the information that they're going to be giving. On their first uniqueness, they brought up how many countries are non-members, but we bring up specifically the analysis that this is because the U.S. is not a member. If the U.S. joins and gets a vote, and when I brought up all the countries who are part of the ICC gets a vote, probably means when U.S. joins, this will mean Russia, China, and the other countries will also join just to be able to check back for U.S. legitimacy, which we can see has happened in the UN with the Security Council. We also bring up specifically how every other country will start joining at the point that U.S. is going to be the first step because they're always a leader in this sector. They also brought up how the first prosecutor was sharing intelligence to other countries, but at the point that you have to go through other countries to get intelligence about who's a criminal and who's not, or what war crimes are happening, this is the type of intelligence that they're getting, not intelligence about military bases or new types of guns or new types of technology, which the negation skews us around to look as. On the link story, they brought up how the ICC forces the U.S. to share U.S. intelligence. Once again, this U.S. intelligence is just about war crimes or who's doing something bad or something illegal or nefarious in these situations. It's not specifically who's general Lieutenant Arnswald or something, very specific details and definitions. On the internal link level, they brought up how the ICC is the highest court and has no check back. This is probably good because once the U.S. joins and increases legitimacy, which goes conceded, probably means that the ICC will always be able to stop every single genocide that occurs in the future. The second internal link was that it's not fair intel gathering because only U.S. information is gathered. We have two responses. First of all, is that Russia, China, and all these other countries will join just to be able to check back U.S. So this means they'll be getting information from all different countries. But secondly, just U.S. information is probably going to be most important because the U.S. talks to or has diplomatic relations with lots of other countries, which probably means their intelligence is specifically key to stopping genocide in the region. Not at this time. The third internal link was that the U.S. is more susceptible because it would be hackable. But this information is this information that could be hackable isn't super hidden in any place. It's just about who is on the terrorist list or who's nefarious. It's not who's hiding in specific military bases. That's not the information that people would be even able to hack. On the impact level, they said Russia tensions increase because of the increased likelihood of Russia attacks. But we can only see the only probable thing is that Russia will join the ICC to be able to check back for the U.S. Probably means the Russia and U.S. tensions will actually go down. But we also bring up how these tensions right now are not unique in both worlds. It's there. So at the point that we're saying that the Russia joining the ICC could decrease tensions, probably means on their own impact level only the firm will be able to solve. Not at this time. The second point was that Israeli-U.S. tensions. Okay, so they basically bring up how the ICC won't hesitate to prosecute Israel. We say this is probably good. If we prosecute Israel, this means there will be a quicker end to this Palestinian-Israel war that's going on. We also say specifically when the ICC prosecutes Israel, this will show that the U.S. is switching sides and going with the rest of the world who is supporting Palestine in this case, which one will be good for U.S. legitimacy, helping bolster our point. But secondly, this will end the conflict faster because at the point the U.S. takes a definitive stance, U.S. is the only one who's literally supporting Israel in this entire conflict. Probably means when the U.S. joins the UN or the other countries who are saying Palestine is the one in the right, or the people who are doing the right thing right now, probably means this entire conflict will end faster, which means you'll have to be voting for the affirmed. On the link level, they said more violence against Palestine. We say this is not going to be happening at the point the conflict ends quicker because the U.S. is switching sides now and showing that this Palestinian conflict, they're going with Palestine. Probably means there'll be less conflict in the entire region. They also brought up how the U.S. could block votes. This is irrelevant at the point we're talking about the tensions in the region, and we're saying specifically the U.S. is going to be stopping this tension. Probably means that you should be voting for the app. On the impact level, none of their impacts really flow through. We also say how Saudi Arabia is very important. Israel is not the only place they can get intelligence or terrorist intelligence from. You can get it from Saudi Arabia and other bases. They also said the water recycling technology, this is not unique. You can get it from like China and other places. We can see this technology and innovation going in different places. On the counterplan is literally the United States should restore funding and logistics support for the ICC. First of all, you can perm this. There's no mutual exclusivity whatsoever. We can join the ICC, but also increase and restore funding and logistics support, which means you have to be voting for the perm. But the reason to prefer the perm is because you can solve all of the negative, all of the affirmative, also have all of the net benefits of the counterplan, which they didn't even provide for. And when you go with the perm, another reason is that when you give logistic and support for the ICC, probably means it increases the legitimacy of not just the U.S., but also the ICC. Means we will always be solving for more war crimes than what the current system is, which means with the affirmation has the 1% risk of solving it.
Okay, order is going to be same order, affin order, negin order. Go ahead and put the CP on top of the neg case. Does that work?
Sorry, can you repeat that real quick?
Yeah, affin order, negin order, but put the CP on top of the neg case. Is everybody ready? On first advantage, we're going to go ahead and be extending the U.S. image and soft power is essentially terminally low. Basically what this means is the uniqueness is going to be overwhelming the link. Look at all the bad policies that Trump has had, right? Like the U.S. trying to trade war, pulling out of the Paris Agreement, pulling out of the TPP, decreasing funding to the UN, all of his anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant sentiments. Like this one action is not enough to change like what the entire world thinks of President Trump. Also, like they also see that the U.S. is very unpredictable, and they're probably just going to assume that he's going to flip-flop anyways. Basically, we're going to see there's going to be no reason why they're actually going to be joining the ICC because the U.S. literally has no legitimacy on the global scale, but also like probably going to actually lead to less countries wanting to join because they can basically just see that like it's going to become less effective because the U.S. is going to try and block every single thing on the ICC that goes against their interests. We're going to be turning all the points here. Also, basically they say on the solvency, there's only a risk they're going to be solving for more crimes. We say no, like we've literally only like been able to solve for 8 like war crimes like in the entire time that's existed for almost 20 years. Even if they say these are big crimes, it's still not a significant amount. There's actually like no proof they'd actually be solving 4 more crimes. Like they don't give us a number of how many the UN War Crimes Commission solved, but like there's probably more than 8 in the entire time they existed. Also, go ahead a little bit on to the line by line. There's literally no link towards humanitarian aid. Like there's no reason why Trump joining the ICC is actually going to make him increase humanitarian aid. If anything, it's probably going to make him decrease it because he's going to make the argument that he's already like benefiting to the international community, and so he doesn't like basically owe humanitarian aid. But also, literally, the UN and the ICC are not affiliated at all. Also, Trump's already like showed a decreased interest in the UN. Why is suddenly this going to change? There's absolutely no link. Also, basically, extend on the issue for Libya. They say that like that the U.S. is currently bombing Libya right now. If that's actually true, like I'm going to assume that Libya is actually a member of the ICC because like 123 countries are. Probably means they can already be prosecuting these U.S. bombings in Libya, and they can already make them stop because you can prosecute a country if the actions happen in the country that's a part of the ICC. Like that's what the ICC was talking about doing with Afghanistan. Basically, like we could already prosecute this, and like we're not going to. Which probably means that even if the U.S. joins the ICC, like nothing is going to change because the ICC is not going to want to go against the U.S. with Libya. And if the U.S. is already bombing Libya, then like we're not going to be basically like voting to basically like be prosecuting this in Libya, and we're simply not going to want to stop. So they basically have no solvency here. Also, literally their impacts here are like increasing U.S. hedge, which I tell you like it's not going to happen because weakness overwhelms the link, and increasing humanitarian aid, they have absolutely no link. Move on to the second advantage of retribution. Basically to go ahead and extend the facts here that like U.S. image is extremely low, so like there's no way they're going to be solving the impacts here is all about the war in Libya, but. To go ahead and extend, like, they could already be prosecuting these crimes with the U.S. Also, like, there's literally no reason, like, why the U.S. uniquely gives the ICC, like, other legitimacy when, like, we haven't shown up in any other, like, international community to be, like, convicting war crimes. Anything else on that?
Syria and the Congo are still carrying on war crimes after being prosecuted by the ICC?
Exactly. So, like, just because the ICC is there does not mean it's going to solve. Syria and the Congo still have lots of war crimes even after the ICC won, and the ICC is not very like efficient because we can see they don't actually have like troops like a stable mechanism to like convict people. Like even if they like convict one individual, there's still so many more individuals in these really unstable countries who can carry that on. Anyone else in Libya could simply continue this. Like very low chance of actually solving with the ICC. Also, probably taking a very long time to do it because they've only been able to actually convict like 8 different people in like the 20 years they've existed.
I mean, turn like the ICC gets weaker because like the U.S.
Yeah, basically just like turn like the ICC actually gets weaker because Israel decreases their perception of the world. Now move on to the counterplan. Basically, they try to perm. There's gonna be no reason to perm specifically. Yeah, but basically, like, we're just competitive through net benefits. Extend the fact that it's actually gonna be like more efficiency with the counterplan without the perm, because we're actually able to give the ICC all the support and any like logistics that it needs without the U.S. having like a seat where they can actually like vote and basically be able to block what the ICC is doing and decrease legitimacy. That means if there's any chance the U.S. votes against a policy that isn't in which isn't in their best interest, which is exactly what the U.S. does, and that automatically decreases the efficiency of the ICC, and that is inherent in the net benefit of the CP. We're able to convict war crimes the most efficiently without the U.S. being able to block it. Now go ahead and move on to the disadvantage one. They basically said that the U.S. won't give them this type of information, but no, once you join the ICC, you have to give them any information they ask you to give in regards to anything that could be potentially any one of these 4 categories of crimes. That means like specifically in Syria, where we currently still have troops, they're going to need to get all this information about names and locations and dates and specific things about, like, in order to get all the data to be convicting this. That means they're going to actually be getting active data of the U.S. Specifically, like, once this data is like out into a big organization that is probably like not super secure, then what we can see is that like it's much more susceptible for other countries to be hacking in. This is specifically how Russia's already said that they want to be like striking U.S. troops in Syria. That means we're actually able to see exactly where this is happening, because if the ICC is ever wanting to like prosecute any war crimes in Syria, which they've already done and will want to continue to do, they're going to need all this U.S. data, which is exactly how this specific data goes in and how Russia can hack into it, basically in order to be shooting down these U.S. Troops. Also, specifically, they say that the other people like Russia and China are going to want to join if the ICC does. This is completely not true. Look at the fact that there's no reason why China and Russia are going to want to be checking back in this way. Like, they don't care about the ICC. China and India aren't even signatories. And so, like, they literally just don't care. Also, like, China and Russia probably know they're going to get convicted of something if they join, so there's literally no reason for them to join, and they're already, like, have, like, much more, like, hegemonic power than the U.S., and they literally don't need this for their soft power or their hard power. They're just going to get convicted. There's no reason they're going to join. It basically means, like, only the U.S. information is in there, and their information is completely susceptible. Also, like, basically, yeah, anything else?
I said the weapons. Did you talk about that?
No. What about that?
Like weapons that are used in attacks are shared, and like the locations of attacks are shared. That's like the info.
Right, exactly. So, like, so specifically things ICC has asked for in the past, like, of other countries is, like, what weapons are used and where they're used, or specifically how, like, Russia and China basically, like, have this full advantage. We also know that, like, China's, like, significantly better. China and Russia are, like, both better at hacking, like, than the U.S., and overall, like, have, like, better, like, cyber offense, which means it's going to be really easy for them to hack in and get any of this information. There's basically, like, unlimited potential for anything they can do with, like, U.S. military, and drastically decreases, like, U.S. hegemony, like, if we, like, don't have the upper hand in any of these military capabilities, and this basically opens up this huge back door, because it's not going to be as good security in the ICC. They just, like, don't have that much funding. That's not their goal. Move on to the disadvantage 2 of Israel. They basically just say that, like, that prosecuting Israel is going to be good. But there's basically double binds here. Either one, the U.S. is going to be basically blocking this because they actually have voting power, and that means that they're not actually going to be able to prosecute Israel, which is going to be, like, doing the opposite of what they say would be good. Or 2, specifically, like, the U.S. is going to have to, like, vote with them or get their vote overridden, or be part of an organization that is prosecuting Israel. The reason why this is so crucial is because the U.S. has literally gone toward Israel in every single issue. Right now, if Trump pulls away, he's showing a huge change in the policies he's been doing for the past 2 years, which specifically going to be why Israel is going to be decreasing like, their relations with the U.S. Like, they're much more likely to want to share, like, their very high-tech intelligence sharing. Like, we have, like, one of the most advanced intelligence sharing in the entire world between 2 countries. There's no reason they're going to be wanting to share all their valuable information if they can't trust the U.S. to actually be like, voting against them in this key body, which basically means, like, we don't have a chance to fight for any, like, remaining terror in the Middle East because we share more intelligence with Israel than anyone else. They also say that we have Saudi that has we have, like, really shaky relations with Saudi Arabia right now, and we might actually be stopping these arms sales with them, specifically, like, because of the war in Yemen, which means we don't actually have them as a key ally in the region, which means we need Israel. Also, onto the key water sharing technology, looks at the fact that Israel is the only country in the world that recycles 80% of their water, and actually, like, have plans to be sharing this technology. Like, Israel's not going to be benefiting us if, like, we generally have poor relations with them. So specifically, this is, like, the best way to be eliminating water shortage. The most important impact here is specifically that if Israel feels vulnerable, they're going to be increasing, like, specifically ground violence against Palestine, which is the most amount of deaths guaranteed from the negative.
Alrighty, I'm gonna go neg in order, then half in order.
convicted 8 cases since 2002, and war crime abuses continue where these convictions happened, you're probably going to be voting in the side of the negation. But let's get on to some of the main points of clash in today's round. Let's go to first this disadvantage of national security. Basically, the only responses on this case were that the information that the U.S. is required to give isn't actually going to be that important. However, no. Hannah tells you in her speech that the information that is used is super important. It's like literally the weapons that are being used on the attacks. These are these weapons being used in operations that are still going on today. That is definitely relevant information that other groups can definitely abuse and get an advantage in. This is information that specifically is uniquely required to be given by the U.S. Russia and China do not have this unique requirement to have to actually share this information, which means that inherently there's going to be a disadvantage for the U.S. And they literally have to give the locations of where these different attacks occurred and the situation around them. This is situational information that, once again, no other countries have to give, which means there's going to be this disadvantage and this imbalance, which is going to make the U.S. way more susceptible to attacks from other countries in the region. And you're probably going to be buying that a lot of the violence we talk about increasing and potential strikes from these countries are going to happen, especially given the fact that Russia's literally been threatening to strike in these regions in the Middle East, which means that we probably have a really high probability of Russia lashing out, considering that literally a few weeks ago they said that they were going to strike a region in Syria with U.S. troops. And getting this type of information and getting this information literally throughout the future, as long as the U.S. is part of the ICC, probably means that this is going to be an impact that's going to continue for a long amount of time and could have a lot of detriments. Now, let's go on to the second disadvantage of Israeli-U.S. relations, and this is probably where we're winning, because at the point where our opponents say is that this is going to end the conflict faster, and this is a deeply rooted conflict that is has been going on for a really long time, and obviously is continuing to happen, and Israel is still committing these abuses. There's no reason why Israel, literally seeing that their biggest ally starting to pull away from them, wouldn't proliferate and or just increase violence toward Palestinians, right? All they tell you is that, oh, this means that the U.S. is just siding with other people. However, no, the U.S. isn't siding with others. When the U.S. sides with other people, Israel just gets more scared, like we tell you. Israel is just going to be more likely to continue committing this violence because they know there's nowhere else to go. And they go on to talk about how this Saudi Arabia is more reliable anyways in regards to dealing with terror and things like this. However, Hannah tells you that our relations with Saudi Arabia right now are really shaky, which literally means our only other base in that region is in Israel, which means more than ever we have to be taking that keeping our relationship strong because of the because the advantages in fighting terror that we get from specifically that base. Now, let's go on to their case. On the first advantage, basically, all they say is that there's going to be more aid flowing. However, once again, they never really respond to, all they say in response to that the ICC does not lead to humanitarian aid is that U.S. hegemony equals humanitarian aid. However, there's no reason why the U.S. would get more hegemony from joining the ICC if it's shown to be ineffective in the past. And additionally, there's no reason why the U.S. they never respond to the fact that the U.S. can be giving these countries aid right now. So once again, I tell you that Trump's rhetoric is and general idea is what's causing a lot of this humanitarian aid to not be given. It has nothing to do with the ICC, which means that none of these impacts are even relevant. And go on to their second advantage of retribution. I literally tell you that there's only been 8 cases solved since 2002, which means there's probably not going to be an increase in retribution. But even if you buy that there's going to be a 1% increase in these war crimes solved, we still have a counter plan which is going to have all the benefits of solving these few crimes that are solved without any of the harms and of terrorism and decreased national security. So let's go on to the weighing. They have a really low probability of one, humanitarian aid, and secondly, ending war crimes because the ICC is ineffective. We have a high probability of Israel increased violence and settlements because Israel's already doing it right now. And secondly is that the U.S. data being more vulnerable will be more vulnerable because we have to give up any data that they say, which means even if it's not dangerous immediately, as long as the U.S. is part of the ICC, it will be dangerous in the future.
Okay, counterplan, disabs, and then advantage 2.
Which one is advantage 2?
Advantage 2 is
Retribution.
the retribution.
Okay.
On the counterplan, you're going to be tell you that basically the U.S. won't have a seat to vote. The way the U.S. gets a seat to vote is by joining the ICC. The reasons to prefer the perm is one, the U.S. seat is going to be key to solving the crimes in Libya, which was completely conceded because they completely concede our analysis that the way you actually get a seat to resolve these crimes is by joining the
Point of order,
ICC, which means once again,
These arguments cross-apply does not benefit to the perm as a new cross-application.
this is just reasons to prefer my partner red. Reasons to prefer the perm.
Like this is like nothing new. It's literally just reason to prefer.
Okay.
The second argument for the reasons to prefer the perm is going to be that the U.S. is actually key to increasing the security of the information because of our relations with Saudi Arabia that actually give us terrorist intel. Their only response to this is they tell you that like our relations with Saudi Arabia are shaky. This is not true, and I can respond to this because this was brought up in the blog. Basically, we can see that our relations with Saudi Arabia are increasing. We can see our oil trade is increasing. We can see the U.S. hegemony in the Middle East is really strong because of our bases in Turkey, with like in Sirleaf, for example, which means the Saudi Arabia relations are actually really good.
Sorry, U.S. hedge strong because of Turkey is a new argument, and like all of our, I think that came out of like the LOC, specifically like the main argument you're responding to.
This is the response that you guys said like Israel is like better than Saudi Arabia. So it's kind
Right,
of
but the fact that like Israel bases key was out of the LOC, and like Turkey and other bases besides Saudi Arabia is new. But it's totally up to the judges.
So yeah, you're basically going to be extending that Saudi Arabia has like good intel with the United States, which means the U.S. is going to be key to actually increasing like the security of the ICC, which means you're not going to be voting on the council and voting on the perm. So now to the disadvantage one. Basically, of national security, they tell you that China and Russia don't care about the ICC or won't get convicted because they don't want to get convicted. We see the reason why China and Russia are going to join is because they want to check back to the U.S. They concede our warrant of the Security Council. The reason why China and the U.S. China and Russia actually joined is because of the United States. So the point where the warrant goes conceded, that means we have 100% probability of China and Russia actually going into this ICC because of the United States, which means you're not going to be voting on disadvantage one. At the point where they tell you the ICC asks for data, this makes no sense. At the point where there's over 100 countries in the ICC, they wouldn't really want to be a part of this ICC if they're actually going to be like hacked all the time. So right off the bat, at the point where there's so many members a part of this ICC, clearly the judges gut check this. They're not really like stealing data from each other. So now to disadvantage two, Israel and U.S. relations, they completely concede that the Palestine-Israel war is happening as of right now. And at the point where they themselves give the analysis that the U.S. is the only country supporting Israel, that means U.S. is going to be key to actually supporting Israel. We can see most of the members in the ICC actually support Palestine, which means that the U.S. actually has a seat and is able to vote for Israel. That is actually better for Israel, right? Because
The argument that U.S. having a seat means they'll protect Israel and that's a good thing is a new argument.
Yeah,
just
that's-
drop that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Just drop that. It's fine.
okay, yeah. So basically, yeah, just extend like but basically the ICC is going to be helping Israel because it's going to actually be able to like resolve the conflict. So now to advantage two, which is that of retribution. So first of all, they completely concede that the ICC was actually dealing with crimes in Yugoslavia and Rwanda, which is like huge genocides the ICC was able to solve. They tell you that like, oh, they were like ICC only solved 8 cases, but they give you the cases like the Rwandan genocide, which is like a huge case, which is completely conceded. So extend that across your flow. The only response they give you on advantage two is that Libya is already a part of the ICC, which means it's already being prosecuted, which is brought up in the blog. However, we can see that even if they're prosecuting Libya, they're only prosecuting this Libyan National Army. They're not actually prosecuting the actual dictator himself, which is Hifter. And the only way to prosecute Hifter and actually stop the crime is by joining the ICC, because only the ICC has the jurisdiction to prosecute these like dictators, which is the only like way you can actually solve for the conflict in Libya is through the ICC, because without the ICC you cannot prosecute Hifter. And we tell you specifically that Hifter is the reason why there's like so many crimes happening in the area. We tell you that like there's like cholera outbreaks in the waters and how women and children are being tortured in the areas, which means the only way you can actually resolve this is through the ICC, which means on the impact level, you're going to give us all of the weight on the impact when we tell you that we're actually going to be able to end conventional warfare in Libya, which was completely conceded because, once again, in the status quo, they're not able to actually prevent these conflicts because of the fact that you need the ICC in order to have the jurisdiction to prosecute Hifter. Anything else?
Also, yeah, say the Palestine conflict's happening like right now in the world in the status quo. They drop like their counterplan, which means they have no way of solving for it, which means our plan always has 1% risk of solving.
Yeah, they can't really solve for Israel, and which means they wait, what?
Basically say like, look at the solvency. Nothing's happening in the world right now to be able to stop this conflict.
Yeah, nothing's happening in the world right now in order to actually solve the conflict in Israel, which means the only like way to solve is by joining the ICC, because like the U.S. will support Israel.
Also, go back to the Israel-U.S. relations.
Yeah.
When they said the ICC won't hesitate to prosecute Israel, extend that probably when U.S. switches to Palestine side, this will end the conflict faster.
U.S. switching to the Palestine's wait, what?
If the U.S. switches to Palestine's side, this means no one's supporting Israel, which means the conflict ends faster.
U.S. going to Palestine's side
will stop
Will
stop support for Israel,
We'll stop support for Israel.
which means it will end the conflict faster.
Which means it'll end the conflict
So
faster.
at the point we're voting on like time frame or
So the
probability,
point where we're voting on time for
you have to be voting
you have
affirmative because we're ending the conflict faster.
You have to be voting affirmative because we're ending the conflict faster, which means it's a sequencing issue, and you have to be voting the affirmative first.
Also on the impact of like extended Saudi Arabia,
Yeah,
will
yeah,
always be able to
extend-
check back.
Yeah, and extend the Saudi Arabia checks back because like relations are stable with South Korea.
They also talk about the military base. Say Israel, like extend our analysis that Israel will not just kick out U.S. just because like randomly they switch sides.
Yeah, Israel won't like. They tell you that like Israel and the U.S. are really strong allies, but that just shows that like Israel will want to keep the United States and won't be flip flopping because of their own analysis of like how Israel is so strong with the United States. So there's no like probability of them like dropping out.
Extend on the water recycling technology that like other places like Japan also has this, and U.S.
Yeah,
is,
like yeah, and Japan and China also have recycling technology, which means like Israel's not key.